the computer. Yeah, great. What I found a lot with these practices is that the practice itself, even though it's like if you do this meditation, you could drop into the direct perception of emptiness or perceive the ultimate nature of reality directly. What I found is that so much is about the approach, so much is about the journey to that place. And it's really nice to go slow. I don't remember the reference to this, but I've just always kept it in my heart, which was the idea of that when you go to see your teacher, you should go slowly. I thought that was really nice. Um, like take your time because the journey to meet your teacher is uh like really important and things will happen. Like people think that teaching is when you meet your teacher or something like that, but you know, there can be teachings all the time. So go with intention and don't rush. Um, so anyway, we're gonna go slowly to the actual meditation, but these weekend workshops are where we will be like doing it very directly. Um, okay, cool. So, and you can find the information on my website, spiritualwarrior.life. Go to events, and then you'll find like the schedule and stuff. Fast for Hunger, June 26th. Fasting is a great practice as long as your doctor thinks that it's also great. I am not a doctor. You should listen to your doctor, usually. Um, so on June 26th, that's going to be the next one. And then instead of lunch, we have a compassion meditation. So that's a lot of fun. It's a great way to, if you've ever practiced asana fasted, it feels really, really unique. And then time to give blood again on the week of July 7th, if that is also something your doctor gets excited about. I am not a doctor. Warrior Circle, you guys already know this, so I'm not going to review it. But every week I do want to raise the question mark. If there's anything that you would like to learn specifically, please ask. Um, because I'm just doing what I feel like is cool, but like as an example, um, I have a couple of one-on-one relationships, and one of them this week, uh, it came up that there was an opportunity to say, "How do you apologize as a spiritual warrior?" Which I thought was a really, really great question, and I was like, just reflecting on my own experiences, um, and there's a process that I think is really sweet of how to apologize that that I think will be really fun to teach one day. It's a combination of a couple different practices all coming together. So, but I thought that was a really wise question, right? Because like, if we realize that we should be living kindly, one of the things that happens is that we realize when we're not kind, and then when we realize that we're not kind, that usually means that we should apologize. And so, how can we make that something that is a deep and profound spiritual practice and not just like, hey, I'm sorry, and then move on? Like, it can be something that's really, really, really beautiful and like affirming of relationships. Anyway, so that's an example. If someone was like, hey, teach me how to apologize, I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. Let me think about that. All right. So those are the announcements. Let's get into the class. Okay. Um, Believe it or not, there is a flow to what's going on. And so I like to review the flow because we are working through some logical sequences here. So now that we're in class three, class one was an introduction, and it had some kind of foundational information in it. And then class two, we started really getting into the commentary on the text of the Bhavana Krama. Uh, and so here's the flow. The starting place of this text, Kamashila's Steps on the Path of Meditation, the first step was to establish this idea that omniscience has a cause and that it's useful, which is clever because the domain, the arena of meditation is consciousness. And so if we were to talk about, you know, if you wanted to talk about playing baseball, you should talk about the baseball field. So, like, okay, there's grass here and there's dirt there. There's four bases, there's a fence. And so it's really important to talk about the arena in which we're working in. So consciousness is the arena in which we're working with when we're talking about meditation. And uh, so, what is the most ideal version of consciousness? What does that look like? Pure consciousness. Um, it's omniscience. Omniscience has a cause, and it helps us help all beings. Because it has a cause, that means that it's something that changes. And because it's something that changes, it means that it can be developed. And the apex of its development is omniscience. So then we talked about, okay, how do we get there? Let's understand. If we understand this ideal, then, a lot of our practice is the pursuit of the ideal. When we practice our asana, the we're working toward this ideal state of a healthy being. Right? And so that is our ideal. So how do we work toward that? So the ideal of consciousness is a consciousness which has total and complete understanding, omniscience. And so we need to understand then how it works. So the way that consciousness works, we talked about perception of subject and object and how those things are related and connected, where those things come from. And then we talked about a really important idea at the very end of last class, which was there are valid supports of consciousness and invalid supports of consciousness. And this is really critical. We're going to talk about this today. I know we're starting very theoretical. I'm doing my best to try to relate it to kind of everyday things because you can obviously, if this is how consciousness works, it's the only thing you experience is this. Um, but spiritual warrior, uh, I think, the brand is very much like about living compassionately. But if we don't have a good foundation about how things work, then it doesn't make sense to be so committed to compassion, I think, unless we understand how things work. So, valid and invalid supports of consciousness is an important idea, and this is the image that we left on last time. So, we're going somewhere from here to there, from this moment to the next moment, from our current version to our future ideal version. And that's like the top of a bridge. And whether we can get there or not depends on the supports of the bridge, because a bridge without support don't work. It's not a bridge. It won't get us to we're gonna go and we're gonna fall in the water and we're gonna suffer. It's gonna be a bad time. And we might get a little bit of the way, but inevitably, if the supports of our consciousness are invalid in their basis, then we're gonna have a bad time. Just like it can be confusing that a coconut can grow in the most inhospitable conditions of a sun-baked beach with salty water. Like very few things can grow there. But you can see these coconuts growing. It's because, they have some amount of life in them. They do have some amount of capacity. It is a support, but it doesn't have longevity, which is why we can do these things that like it seems like by cheating we win. But that's a short-lived win, if indeed you win. Or lying feels like we escaped the uncomfort of telling the truth. But the reality is that that's a short-lived comfort because that's not the nature of lying. The nature of lying is suffering. The nature of cheating is suffering. And so you might look like you're growing, but if you're in an inhospitable condition, then your growth will be limited. So if we're talking about developing consciousness, which by nature is limitless, then the thing which limits consciousness is not the nature of consciousness, it's the supports of consciousness. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So that's where we left off. And now we're going to talk more about invalid supports of consciousness and how that comes into our daily life. Um, I just thought this was too good not to read it. I know it's a lot of reading, uh, but it's really good. Just open yourself to hear this. Super sweet. This is the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama. It was earlier stated that the ignorance that oops, there's a typo. Wow, that's probably really bad karma, isn't it? Just kidding. It was it was earlier stated that the ignorance that is a misconception. I'm sorry, that's what that is supposed to say. That is a misconception of true existence could be brought to an end. So the ignorance that is a misconception of true existence could be brought to an end. This is why is it? So this gives us hope, right? This is saying that the ignorance, which is the misconception, which is the basis of our whole suffering, the thing which limits our capacity to develop our consciousness, it can be brought to an end. Good news. Okay, but why? Because in Buddhism, you have to prove things logically. You can't just say something and then move on. You have to be like, and here's why that makes sense. And then you personally have to decide whether you agree if that makes sense or not. That's the entire basis of Buddhism. Logical, personal analysis. Never believe anything that you hear. Check out everything. Okay, this is because the ignorant mind does not have the support of being a valid cognition. So cognition is like the ability to think or a moment of perception in a way. So the ignorant mind does not have the support of being a valid cognition. The support of the story in your mind is not a valid support. The way these two minds perceive objects is in direct contradiction. And so the direct contradiction is, oh, well, it's right here. The mind that perceives the selfless nature of an object. Remember, we were saying an object doesn't have any qualities of its own. They are empty of its own qualities. And so the way that His Holiness the Dalai Lama describes this is by saying that an object has a selfless nature. Right? If that object had a self, like that was objective, and you could go and you could find it, and everybody would see it the same, then it would have a nature. It would have a self in a way. But the argument here is that objects are selfless. That is the nature of objects. So the mind that perceives the selfless nature of an object is a powerful antidote against the ignorant mind. And therefore, the ignorant mind can be overcome. I think that's very hopeful. I'll say it again. The mind that perceives the selfless nature of an object is a powerful antidote against that ignorant mind, and therefore, the ignorant mind can be overcome. This is analogous to the way in which any aspect of human misery can be reduced when the appropriate measures are applied to counter it. So, if you have a fever and someone gives you a nice, cool thing on your forehead, like you feel better. Or if you're hungry and you eat food, you feel better. And so, in the same way that an ignorant mind is the field in which suffering grows out of, the mind which thinks that things have a self nature, then the antidote of that, just like the antidote of hunger is food, the antidote of that is perceiving the selfless nature of things. And so the antidote of food is always more powerful than hunger. It's not like you eat food. Well, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes I eat and I'm still hungry. But anyway, you get the idea. Um, it is the nature, and then here's like the culminating idea. It is the nature of things that their potential is reduced when confronted by opposing factors. Like a fire is reduced by water because it's an opposing factor. Those are opposite things. Like ice is opposed by fire, things like that. So if you think about, here's a great example. Um, and Sophie, I don't know how much I'm like a deep nerd when it comes to physiology. Like I love studying like strength. I'm really fascinated by it. And so there's there's like it's two really important components of a muscle fiber. There's the sarcomeres, and then there's the oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting the other one. Anyway, there's like basically pockets of water that can inflate, and then there's the part that actually does the work of the actin myosin bridges like latching against each other. And so the strength of a muscle isn't by these like pockets of water. The strength of a muscle is by how many of these connections there are of the actin myosin, like for them to like grab onto each other and then do work. And so bodybuilders are huge because they've learned the methodology of expanding or bloating their muscles. It doesn't mean that they're stronger than a guy who is half their weight. And so the guy or gal who's half the weight but has more of those actual workers in their muscle, they can lift way more than the bodybuilder. And so you see these guys and gals who are like seem very thin, but are like extremely strong. And you're like, how did that happen? Like, especially if you look at like people who work on farms their whole life or in manual labor, they're not necessarily bodybuilder size, but they're stronger than most bodybuilders. And so if we think about size of muscle, that is in many ways, this is an imperfect example, but I think it's a good analogy. Size of muscle is an invalid support for strength because a bigger muscle doesn't mean more strength. And so if you look at two people and they're about to have a like a tug of war and one is small and the other is big, the nature of those two people will actually come to fruition when they're actually engaged, right? Because the way that they look is not necessarily the way that they are. Like if you thought that the way someone looked determined their strength, then you would see these two people and you'd be like, that big guy's gonna win. And then the small person wins because they're actually stronger. When we think of a valid support winning against an invalid support, that's like, you know, kind of the example of like which one is validly strong. It will always win against the one who is invalidly strong. Not to say that bodybuilders aren't strong, okay? I think bodybuilders are super interesting. I think it's super cool because someone's working hard to do a thing and they're committed and focused and that's fun. Um, but when we're talking about what is actual strength, uh, which one is the valid strength and which one is the invalid strength? And bodybuilders, to be fair, aren't necessarily trying to get strong. That's not their goal. So when we think about valid cognition versus invalid cognition, and we say, now fight. The one which is understanding the selfless nature of objects will always win against the one which is misunderstanding the nature of objects. The one which understands that things are empty, that mind will always overcome the ignorant mind because the ignorant mind has a false basis and the wise mind has a valid basis. Cool? Okay. So let's talk about misunderstanding and understanding, which you'll find in a lot of translations to be ignorance as misunderstanding. I prefer misunderstanding over ignorance. And this it's a key distinction. I mean, listen, it's hard to translate. I get that. English is your second language. It's like trying to translate things is not an easy task because there's nuance to the language. So I've come to prefer the term misunderstanding over ignorance. Ignorance means I never knew it in the first place, whereas misunderstanding means I think I know it, but actually I don't. Like, oh, I know that stealing will always make me more money. That's a misunderstanding. Okay, so the mind which misunderstands. And so we do this all the time. We do this all day. Like, oh, I'm gonna drink water because the basis of my well-being is in the water. And so if I drink more water, that's a misunderstanding, actually. According to this school, the understanding would be the water is simply just the carrier of me of a message that I sent long ago. And the message was, I'm going to take care of your health. So anytime I took care of somebody else is now a message which is being delivered by the water, which is why the water can make me feel good. There's nothing in the water which makes me feel good. Okay? So technically, misunderstanding is when consciousness cannot be completely aware of its object. Misunderstanding is when consciousness cannot be completely aware of its object for two reasons. Number one, and by completely aware, in a superficial sense, it means I know everything about this object in a superficial way, but ultimately, I also perfectly understand that it is empty. So that's a complete understanding, is that you perfectly perceive the illusion and you perfectly perceive the truth at the same time. It's both. And so the reason why you can't is because there's some kind of lack of a favorable condition, or there's some obstacle creating adverse conditions. Casually, all right, so that's like a technical, which is like you got to think about that for a while. Casually, though, misunderstanding is when the perception of a thing is contrary to the way that it actually is. So I understand this to be like this, but it ain't that way. So that's a misunderstanding. It's like, oh, I don't know, I'll try to do like a hair reference. You know, when you like try to straighten your hair and it gets all nice and then you go out into the rain and then it gets all poofy. And let's say that you used a product that like made it so that it wouldn't get all poofy, but then you went out into the rain and it got all poofy. You're like, oh, I thought that that would make my hair not poofy. That's why I bought the product. Well, that's a misunderstanding because it's not actually that way. So you thought you understood it, but it simply was not actually true. And so you act on that misunderstanding, and then what occurs isn't what you expected. Whereas if you truly understood that product, and you truly understood the rain and hair and like everything, then you would have never thought that that would have worked because the truth is that it wouldn't have worked. And so that's a clear understanding. Anything other than that is a misunderstanding. So we think we understand it, but in reality we don't. Another example of this is like when we want to say something to our partner, like our business partner, our romantic partner, our family partner, whatever, just someone else. And we're like, I'm gonna say something, and then they respond in a way that you totally did not expect. And now they're mad at you. And you're like, what? I just said thank you. You know, I said thanks for dinner. And they're like, what do you mean thanks for dinner? And you're like, whoa, whoa. You know, like, you had a misunderstanding. You thought that by saying that thing, a certain thing would happen, but it didn't actually turn out that way. That means that to some degree, you had a misunderstanding. And then you're like, no, 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 this is just a misunderstanding. Like, relax, like, relax. Like, let's understand each other, right? And then now, in understanding, all the conflict begins to dissolve, hopefully, theoretically. So, understanding is a mind. And I love this language, by the way. Let's try to catch this language. Um, Understanding is a mind. And we're going to talk about this next class more. And then over here, um, where is it? The way these two minds perceive. So often we think, oh, I have one mind, my mind. But if you look at the way that it's written is the mind which perceives incorrectly or the mind which misperceives. And so we talk about these different minds. I think that's really interesting. We're not going to get into that today. So understanding is a mind which perceives, oh my gosh, there's so many typos. I should really use AI. Which perveises. Thank you for your grace in advance. Um, typos, admittedly are a very, I have an extremely persistent karma to see typos in my work. I don't know its cause. I've been working on it for years. Anyway, please forgive me. Okay, understanding is a mind which perceives that an object has no inherent qualities. Understanding is a mind which perceives that the object has no inherent qualities. That's understanding. Because, why is it that way? Because that perception conforms with the way the object actually exists. This is a very obvious statement, but it's at the same time extremely profound. Understanding means that you see a thing a way because it is that way. Yay, congratulations. How profound. But if we really dig into the implications of this, that's when it becomes radically life-changing. It totally changes the way that you walk through the world. So understanding is when you see a thing and it is that way because it is that way. Misunderstanding is when you see a thing a way which it could never be. That's misunderstanding. It could never be the way that you see it. That's a misunderstanding. Understanding is you see it for what it actually is. And don't we want that for ourselves? And don't we want that for each other? Like, I love you. And I want to see you for exactly who you are. I want to understand you. I think that seeking to understand somebody else is one of the most beautiful acts of love that you could ever imagine. And then when someone takes the time to understand you, really see you as you are, I think that's a profound act of love too. And that's an indicator of a perfect partner. Someone who really wants to know you. Like, I just want to know you. Everything. I want to have a total perception, accurate, of you. To me, that's incredibly intimate. Like keep your red lights and music or whatever. Like yes, that's intimate too, but this is intimate in a way that is just totally irreplaceable. It's like a profound intimacy of just I want to know, I want to understand you totally. Um, so understanding why is it that understanding in its highest sense means to see the selfless nature of objects? See that an object has no inherent qualities? It's because that's the way things actually are. That's why it's understanding. It conforms with the way the object actually exists. So therefore, it has a valid support. Oh, because it's the way it is, right? How many times have you operated on a lie and then eventually it just doesn't work out? It like runs out of energy. Like a lie will always run out of energy eventually. Like if I told you that my name was Tim, my name's Timothy. That's a lie. My name is not Timothy. Eventually, you guys are gonna find out probably as long as if we all stick around long enough, you're gonna figure out my name's not Timothy. Because it's not true. There's no valid basis to it. So it's limited in how far it can go. Just like the coconut ran out of capacity to grow because it didn't have a valid support. And so an understanding mind has the valid support because it sees objects in the way that is actually true, and therefore can outpace the devil, which is misunderstanding. It can outpace the lie. It can outpace suffering. It can outpace everything with invalid supports because eventually those invalid things will run out of capacity to be supported. That's cool. If you want to build your mind on something which is infinitely powerful, you would build it on truth because truth is limitless in its capacity because it's truth. Yeah, so that's cool. So we should seek truth. Um, I think that makes sense. So we talked a little bit yesterday about apparent reality and ultimate reality, and how are we doing on time? We're doing great on time. Look at us. Apparent reality. Um, okay. I should say this now and then I should say it later too. One of the misunderstandings of this teaching is that everything we perceive is wrong and we should reject everything that we see. And that is not correct. We should just not misunderstand it, but we shouldn't reject it. It's what we got. Like, why would you throw away what you have? Like, a yogi uses everything for the sake of all beings. That is a definition of a yogi, that they use every single thing for the sake of all beings. There is nothing you don't use for liberation. You use every single thing, including false things. Right? Like a magician, the job of a magician is to entertain people, which I think is great. It's so fun to be entertained. Like the whole point of yoga is to have fun. And obviously, their job is to create illusion. So they're not throwing away illusion. They're using it for the happiness of everybody who's watching. I think that's really sweet. So we should do the same. But the magician never misunderstands the illusion. They're never caught in the illusion. They become the creator of the illusion. They become a dancing partner to the illusion. And so when they talk about the middle way, there's so many ways that that comes into play. But one of the most essential ideas is that we can have two extreme views on reality. Nothing exists, and everything exists in the way that it seems. And both of those are wrong. To think that nothing exists is a very scary place that usually ends in something like suicide or hurting other people. Like nihilism, it's not true, it's not real, it's a wrong understanding, and it's extremely harmful, extremely painful. That is not what this means, that we should reject everything because nothing is real. But also, if you go to the other extreme, everything is real, meaning if I eat more ice cream, I will be happier. If I take more drugs, I will be happier. If I get more money, I will be happier. Like thinking that things are in things is also a misunderstanding that will also lead you to great suffering and also would lead you to things like suicide and hurting other people and like harmful addictions that kill you and hurt others. Like thinking that things are the way that they seem is a misunderstanding and drives and will drive you crazy. It will drive you to feel very unfulfilled. You might feel some level of fulfillment, which is valid, but ultimately no. And so the middle way is about finding the middle between those things. Things are real in the sense that they're functional and we can experience them. Like I can go stand in front of a car and I will get hit. Okay. Like that's a real, you can't tell me that's not real. But that's not the ultimate nature of things. The ultimate nature of things is the reason I saw the car hit me is because I made it that way. Because inherently it isn't that way. But I made it that way. The reason it is real is because I could perceive it. That's what made it real. And it came from where all of my perceptions come from, which is my past actions, thoughts, and words. Um, the reason why shoulder stand was good today and the reason why it hurt me 2 weeks ago is not because shoulder stand changed. It's because I changed, right? So the inherent nature of shoulder stand is not that it's good or bad. It's empty. That doesn't make it less real. I just need to understand where the reality comes from. Okay. So apparent reality is what is ordinarily perceived by an untrained mind. I think that that's a really kind of brutal definition. It's like apparent reality is the ordinary perception of someone who hasn't taken the time to train their mind. So apparent reality is still a real reality, but it's the one that's obvious. It's the one which we is apparent. It appears to us. Wh- And the nature of apparent reality, and this is amazing, and please catch this, when we go to investigate the nature of apparent reality, we will find that it is not ultimately true. Shoulder stand is good. Social media will make me more money. Right? Meditating will make me happier. Like, none of those things are true from their own side. Social media can make you more money. Social media can also be a dumpster fire of your money. Shoulder stand can really do amazing things for your health. You can also very much damage your spine in shoulder stand. Right? I forget the third one. Um, Meditation. Oh, some people go into meditation retreats and they go crazy. They lose their mind. Some people go into meditation retreats and they find the ultimate nature of their mind. And so if we were to go and try to find that those things that in apparent reality, if we thought that they were themselves on their own, independent of anybody perceiving them, then we would find that ultimately they're not true. Everyday life is full of contradictions between the way certain things appear and their actual mode of existence. We see this all day long. The way things actually exist is different from the way that they appear to exist. Here's a proof. If things existed in the way that they appeared, then no one could ever be let down. Right? Like, oh man, my mom really let me down. I really thought that she was going to X. Or, oh man, my business partner really let me down. I really thought that they were going to Y, Z, whatever. It appeared as though that was how it was going to be, and then it wasn't, and now I'm hurt. If things existed in the way that they appeared, then no one could ever be let down or disillusioned. Disillusionment or being let down, the only way that that can arise is because there's a discrepancy, there's a difference between the way a situation appears to be and the way that it actually is. Like, an even less serious version of this is like, I grew up playing sports, and so like baseball. So there's this thing where you try to get out the opponent at two places, second base and first base, and it's called a double play, and it's like a big deal. And everybody needs to be on the same page because it takes a lot of people to work together to do it. And it's so disappointing when there's usually like three people involved, the first baseman, the second baseman, and then like a third person somewhere, third baseman or shortstop or something like that, or pitcher or whatever. It's so disappointing when two people are on the same page and one person isn't. But it looks like they are. They're in the right place, they're looking at you, and you're like, okay, let's do that thing, but like it's happening so fast. You don't have time to be like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Are you ready? It's just like you get the ball, you throw the ball, the person gets the ball, and then they don't throw the ball again. You're like, what? Like, throw it to the next guy. We could have gotten him out, it would have been awesome. It would have been epic. We would have won the game or whatever. That would be impossible if things existed in the way that they appeared. Because you're like, dude, it looked like you were ready. You know, I thought we were all on the same page. That obviously means that you're not understanding reality. And so how often does that happen in more serious, parts of our life or something, right? Um, so but it's real still because we're playing baseball. Like we're running a business or we're trying to throw a surprise birthday party and like you weren't supposed to say the thing. You ruined the surprise, right? And so when we understand this nature of reality, then we're not surprised at being surprised. Because out of the pain of that surprise, we hurt ourselves and other people so much. Because when the guy doesn't throw the ball, you say, "You're stupid. I hate you. You're bad at this game." And guess what? That's not kind. You're gonna feel like trash. They're gonna feel like trash. Your team is gonna fall apart because you're literally ripping yourselves apart. Like literally no one wins when you do that. When your business partner messes up and you say, "I can't believe you did that." A yogi would be like, "Huh, all right." You know, a yogi would be like, okay, cool, let's keep going." Like I know where that came from. That came from me. I would never blame you. You know what I mean? Like, uh, and also when things are good, you also wouldn't get lost in the goodness. Like, I can think about so many times when I was partying and I was just feeling good. And I was just like, yeah, another drink because I feel good. And like, this is good, right? Another drink is good. And then catch me in the morning after, and I was like, that was stupid, you know, because I was lost in the good. So you can get lost in the bad and you can get lost in the good. Both of these things there's nothing in them. And to get lost in them means you're on the road to suffer. Um, and this happens to me so often today in this way is that I'll be having such a nice day. I'll be having such a nice time. And then something unpleasant happens, and I'm like, ah, man, I was having such a good day, And then and I know where it comes from, but for some reason, I'm expecting things to stay good, and for things to go from good to bad, or even good to neutral is painful. And you're like, ah, man. And I was like, why did I expect anything, you know? Whereas if I didn't have grasping onto things being good, because like things are, fortunately, I perceive my world very pleasant very frequently. And then I'm just like, and I just get comfortable in that. And then when it's not that way, I'm like, whoa, this is weird. And then I suffer because I have an expectation. But, you know, expectation is the beginning of suffering. So now we're going to get into those expectations. And this is really extraordinary teaching, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite verses in the Yoga Sutra, which you will hear me say that 195 times because there's 195 verses in the Yoga Sutra. Um, Misunderstanding apparent reality is suffering, and here's how. Anicca shuchi dukkha natmasu nitya shuchi sukmatma khyattir vidya or vidya. This is so cool. In ignorance, we misunderstand our world. Things that cannot last, things that are unclean and painful and that are not themselves, seem to us as if they will last, as if they are clean and pleasant, and very much themselves. This is so freaking good. And let's just look at the Sanskrit real quick. So anitya and nitya. So look at the parallel structure. Anitya. So nitya is clean. Oh wait, sorry. Nitya is nitya shuchi dukkha. Sorry. Nitya is like lasting. So anitya means can't last. And then below here is nitya. So anitya and nitya. That's the opposites. So the things that cannot last, we think they can last. And then ashuchi. And then shuchi. That's ashuchi is unclean and shuchi is clean. And we can think of it as like pure. Like pure meaning something that creates liberation, and impure being something that keeps us in suffering. So we think that impure things are pure. So we can see the parallel structure here. And then dukkha and sukha. So dukkha is painful and sukha is pleasant. So then we see the next parallel there, dukkha and sukha. And then anatmasu and atma. So anatma means that are not themselves. And then atma is it is itself. Um, and then kyat is the root for seeing. No, no, sorry. Kyat is should I forget the root of kyat? I, yeah, I think it's actually seeing. Kyatir to see it truly or untruly is avidya. So anyway, I got too deep in the Sanskrit there. It's just really interesting. It's really good to see these like polar opposites, like these pairings. So let's try to think of things that cannot last that seem to us that they will last. So what's an example of that? Like people have this feeling that their house will last, and then they're just like they lose their mind when their house breaks down. And it's like, dude, that's literally the nature of your house is that it will break down. You know, I see so many people get so afflicted. They're like, my freaking door broke. And you're like, obviously, like that's what doors do. Do you think that the nature of doors it's that they will stay unbroken? The fact that your door is unbroken is an error. Like that is like if we take 1 trillion years of history and we think about how much time in that 1 trillion years your door is not broken, it's like non-existent. And so if we really wanted to imagine that your door had a nature of its own, the nature of your door is that it's broken on average. And so to think that your roof will stay good, to think that your door will stay good, to think that your floor won't be creaky is a very much a misunderstanding of it. And so then we suffer. And so I think it's really important to meditate on these things, and we're actually going to do that today. Let me look at the rest of the slides. Yeah, okay. We're going to come back to this. So I'm going to speed up. Um, things that cannot last, they seem to us as if they will last, including our own life. Like people are like, I can't believe I'm dying. I'm like, really? You can't believe it? Like the fact that you're healthy is a total error. Like it's a crazy, crazy chance. Like it's wild luck that you are healthy. Like the nature of a body is that it will decompose. And it takes crazy kindness and luck to see a body not decompose. All right. Um, and then we think that, things that are unclean, we think that they're clean. Um, there's lots of examples like that. Like a very dramatic example is an addict will think that they will have some kind of good experience from the substance that they abuse. So in that way, they think it's clean in the sense that it will give them happiness. But the nature of a substance that we abuse is that it's unhappy. Um, things which are painful. We think that they're pleasant. Those go hand in hand, I think. And the thing we think that things that are not themselves are very much themselves. Like I am I. And it's like apparently, but ultimately no. Ultimately, you are empty. Ultimately, you are infinitely transformable. That is the most I thing about you, is that you have the potential to become anything. The fact that you're perceiving yourself in a certain way right now, that's not the nature of you. The nature of you is that you have the potential to be perceived. The perception you're having is not the ultimate thing of you. It is the apparent thing of you. Things are not themselves. Don't don't misunderstand that. Pretty radical, right, guys? I think it's pretty badass. So, when you're suffering, this is a really nice way to analyze your suffering. Which one of these avidyas, which one of these misunderstandings am I in right now? And, it's just a framework, but sometimes suffering feels really big. Um, that it's really nice to have like a framework to work with because then you're like, as soon as you give something a name, it goes from too big and ambiguous and overwhelming to, okay, now it's got a name, it's defined, now I can understand it, now I can work with it, now I can transform it. And so you're like, oh man, I really thought that this clean thing, sorry, I really thought that this thing could be clean. And it's not, you know? Like I see this with uh I see this a lot with sex. People think that having sex is like inherently this like cl pure clean thing, but there's so many examples of when that's so harmful. And so but the misunderstanding is that it's so overwhelmingly pranic. There's so much prana moving during that experience that it's if you don't have a disciplined mind, it's extremely easy to misunderstand. And so I see a lot of people go for physical pleasure as a way to find shelter from suffering, thinking that that thing could actually help them. Anyway, it's just really interesting. And then if you can identify these habits in yourself, then you can start to heal. So, conclusion, we should train the mind in valid understanding because all of these are invalid understandings. All of these are the invalid supports of consciousness that will drop us into the water as we're trying to cross the river or cross the ocean. It cannot support happiness, these misunderstandings, because the cognition is on an invalid basis, that things are themselves. So, what do we do about that? What we do about that is that we train the mind on valid understandings. So, meditation specifically in the context of Buddhism refers to positive transformation of the mind in order to eliminate its defective qualities and improve its positive qualities. So less of the bad, more of the good. Again, this is not surprising definition, but it is beautiful. We meditate to have a happier mind, and try to like there are destructive patterns that we engage in our mind. Like maybe it's self-destruction, where you're like, I can't be this successful, and then you start to self-sabotage. Or maybe somebody starts to love you and you say, well, I'm unlovable. And now you start to destroy that relationship. Or you start to feel happy and you're like, I don't deserve happiness, and then you start to destroy your happiness. Like those are these very strange, defective qualities of our mind that don't make us happy. And if we don't do something about it, they'll continue to go because that's the nature of cyclic behavior, is that in distress, we respond with something which creates distress. And then we're in distress. And then we respond in a habitual state of mind, which creates distress. And then we're stuck. And you see people in your life who you're just like, man, I wish I could help you get out of this like whirlpool that you're stuck. And I would do freaking anything to get you out. And then you learn that you're the same person. Like you see it in other people because you are that way in yourself. And so meditation helps us to stop investing in invalid things, thinking that they're truth. But that's difficult. So we need to train the mind. Like you can't just like expect that that happens. It's not like someone says, "Yeah, I hit a bullseye with playing darts," and you're like, "Cool," and then expect that you're going to hit a bullseye. No, you have to train yourself on truth. You have to train yourself in method, the method which apprehends the truth. So there's two kinds of meditations, generally speaking, that help us to train the mind. And there's way more than this. But there's two particular ones that we're going to talk about today, and I'm kind of gonna fly through these. Um, on Tuesdays, we'll get more into this. There's analytical meditations, there's single pointed meditations. Cool. The two go together. Here's how. And this is really, really, really cool. Becky, I know you have a little more mileage in the teachings. For me, like it's really cool to see how they come together. Sophie, not that you don't, but Becky goes to the classes that I go to sometimes. So I know more of what she has heard, because I am there as a student also. So through analysis, we become familiar with an object. So that's analytical meditation, familiarizing yourself with an object. And theoretically, we're doing that to gain understanding, to understand the object. That's why we're analyzing it. You're like, here's the thing, and you're like, cool, I'd like to understand it. I'd like to know this thing. So, like, the object, for example, could be this verse, which is what we're going to do in a moment. We're going to meditate on this verse. This will be the object. We're going to analyze it to see, do we agree with it? Do we not agree with it? Why is it that way? Why isn't it another way? In what ways can I relate to this? In what ways can I not relate to this? So those are examples of analysis. We're taking an object and we're turning it around in our mind's eye, trying to really understand it. Ultimately, what we're trying to do with all analytical meditation is understand the true nature of objects. And what that really brings us to is also as like a obligation. By trying to understand the true nature of objects, then we also must understand the true nature of subjects. Because you can't have one without the other. You get half of an equation if you just talk about objects. Because consciousness is the interplay of the two. Without one, you can't have consciousness. And by the way, different schools would debate me on that. But hey, that's my school. Um, so then once we have some kind of result of our analysis, then we concentrate on whatever realization we have had, whether it's the ultimate nature of reality or something along the way to that realization. So we concentrate on that realization single-pointedly without further analysis. You just abide. You're just in the realization. And that is then habituating the mind on truth. So very, very, very briefly, if I was to summarize this using the capital T word, truth, would be find truth and then stay in truth. Or seek truth and then get familiar with it, whatever you found. Again, that sounds really obvious. It's like, yeah, that makes sense, but like at least, I don't, I had to learn how to do that. But like that's not a shocking statement I just made. It's not like, what? Seek truth and become familiar with it. Cool. And that's what I love about so much of this is that like you're like, yeah, okay. Makes sense. But then when you go to actually apply it, that's when that's when you're like, what? But the basis is very obvious, I think, at least. Okay, last two slides, and then we'll apply this in meditation. Why is training the mind critical? Well, lots of reasons, but what I'm going to do here is body and speech move at the motivation of the mind. However conscious or subconscious, like the reason we move is because we have some kind of motivation. The reason we talk is because of some kind of motivation. And so both of those things in some way are subservient to the mind or subordinate to the mind. So by training the mind, we enjoy mastery over our entire being. Now, how do we go to work on the mind? Very useful to use the gateways of body and speech. Extremely useful to use those as entry points to the mind because sometimes it's really hard to work directly on the mind. And that's where your asana is extremely useful because through the body we can work on the mind. And that's why mantra is really, really powerful because through the speech we can work on the mind. And mantra in the deepest sense, right? Not in like the obvious like Om Mani Padme Hum. Like obviously including that or something, but speech is so powerful because it's a gateway to the mind. So we should treat it like that. So it's not to say that we don't train our body and our speech, but to train our body and speech with the motivation of training the mind is really potent. Okay. And all of this so that, and here's the punchline. This is how we create a meaningful life. And that's the entire basis of spiritual warrior. That's why I do this. Because I want to help as many people who want to. I want to help them live the most meaningful life that they can. And the way that I understand that is to understand what your core values are and be them, which takes a warrior. It takes a warrior's attitude to do that. Um, to live fearlessly on purpose. The purpose being your core values, which you can decide what those are. Like I teach core values all the time, which in a word is compassion, like serve others. That's a simplified version of all the other ones. But if we don't train our mind, then, well, what did I write on the slide? Through the process of training the mind, we learn many new things. That's fun. That's cool. And then we're able to detect and identify the things which need to be improved or corrected. Very useful. When we underutilize or misutilize our mind, we make mistakes and we suffer. I don't think we should necessarily beat ourselves up on mistakes, but I'd rather not make mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, um, so that's option one is to underutilize or misutilize our mind. Because you see a lot of people who are very sharp. And I wrote a really nice blog post on this. At least I think it's nice. On my Substack called a meaningless a sharply meaningless blade. Like some people sharpen their minds, sharpen their minds, sharpen their minds, but to fight in a battle that doesn't mean anything. You know, they're like so freaking good at doing a meaningless thing. And you're like, you misutilized your mind. And I can say that only if they actually believe that they didn't realize their life's purpose or something like that because they got distracted by something that didn't have meaning, which is really easy to do, by the way. When the mind's potential is skillfully harnessed, however, we derive positive and pleasant results. Yay! So by cultivating mental discipline, we gain mastery over our body and speech, such that even in unpleasant situations, our inner peace is undisturbed. And I think this is super cool. Like, um, there's a story of my teacher that I think is really sweet. that I'd like to share with you. Um, about this idea of like being unflappable, like undisturbable in your inner peace. And why that's useful is that we don't hurt other people when we're like that. Um, my teacher was in a situation, and I wasn't there. I've heard this story secondhand. And so I don't really know, but I like the story. And even if it's not true, I think the story is useful. Apparently, my teacher was teaching, and someone took a glass of red wine and threw it in his face, which is very disrespectful. I don't care who you are. But of course, it's my teacher, so for me, I'm like gobsmacked. I'm like, what? And uh, and then the person who threw the glass of wine dropped the glass and it shattered. And apparently, the very first reaction of my teacher was he said, he was like, be careful, you might step on the glass. Oh, what? Well, like the very first thing when someone just very rudely disrespected that person was to protect that person from stepping on glass. Like that is just like such an extraordinary expression of a trained mind. Someone who just has agency, you know, really beautiful. Which, by the way my teacher teaches tapas, if you study the yamas and the yamas, a way that a lot of teachers will teach tapas is going through like really difficult things, like setting 5 fires and then sitting in between them and meditating and enduring the pain. Like that's one of the ways that people teach tapas. Um, the way my teacher teaches tapas is to be patient when someone hurts you. So badass. So anyway, um, because you're passing through then the fire of your own self-cherishing. That's the fire that you're baking yourself by. It's infinitely easier to sit by 5 fires than it is to not be angry at someone who hurt you. But I think one has more spiritual value than the other, personally. Okay. Um, questions, comments, discussion, concerns, observations, songs, dance, jokes, poetry?
Wow, this was incredible. Especially at the end of it, I love all the examples you bring with the story and like tapas training. So
Yeah,
clever. It's really relate a lot, yeah, throughout the life. Thank you so much.
cool.
Um, as always, I need to meditate more on all the things I heard today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a lot of it, so
Oh, wow.
thank you so much. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I learned, yes, a lot. Now I need to go over it again to kind of
Yeah,
stay in.
cool. Thank you. And I don't know what it's like when you teach asana, but that verse is a really nice verse to bring into the beginning of an asana class, like to help people train minds, like thematically. Uh, you're like the things that cannot last, we think that they will. So this posture that we're in, people are like she's never gonna get us out of Warrior 2 or something like that. You'd be like, Nitya, Nitya, So anyway, it's
That's
when
great. Yeah.
I don't teach asana that much. I do love to teach asana very much, actually. It's very sweet to teach asana. So this is one of the ones that when I teach asana, I love to bring the sutra into the mental theme of a class.
Mhm.
And then also the valid and invalid supports. You could talk about with like Vrikshasana, like tree pose or any balancing posture. It's like, what is a valid support, like of your stance? Like, what are we building our life on? And so you can use that as like a moving meditation of like, think about invalid supports. Like,
Right.
yeah, so anyway. And then what's
Thank
actually
you
going to
so
give us
much.
balance? Yeah.
That's a really, yeah, really great idea.
Yeah, cool. Fifth verse, second chapter. All right.
Um,
Cool. So, uh, Becky, no obligation, but if you'd like to respond or share anything, go for it.
Yeah, I feel the same. I took a lot of notes and
Hmm.
I made some notes of like what I wanted to go back and listen to again on the recording because it was so deep. It was so I don't know, so beautiful. I feel like a lot of the things you said were like a poem. Like I don't know how to explain that, but it was so like beautifully worded.
Oh, thank you, Becky.
And one thing that kind of stayed with me is when you said that the water is a carrier. That was really, really like something I never really thought about before.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, cool. Nice reflection. Thank you.
And I don't really do analytical meditation, so the way that you presented it makes me want to do them now. Like I just never thought about
Nice.
it as finding truth. I always think about it more in terms of like when I can't make a decision, like and then I don't want to do that because I need the mental discipline, like you said.
Hmm.
So I need to like, I don't know, that was really inspiring. It just makes me think differently about how I want to work with my mind to get
Hmm.
me, to where I want to go and how and who and how I want to be. So thank you.
Wow. How about that? Let's go. Thank you. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate it. Um, cool. Do you guys want to do a little meditation here at the end? Because I think that it'd be nice to try to apply this. Becky, by the way, you went to you went to that subtle body teaching, right? Yeah. What you just said about the water, you can also relate to when I was talking about messages and messengers. The messenger is not the message, but you need both. Yeah. So, and it's a misunderstanding to think that the messenger is the message. So if you remember that teaching, and I know we didn't record that, and that was very intentional because I said a lot of spicy things that should not be recorded. But that's one of the ways that we can connect what you just heard now and what you felt, and then what you heard in that class. Because what we just talked about, we're talking in an obvious way, but you can directly experience it in your subtle body as prana moving through your channels, as the ladies deliver truth, right? So, okay, here we go. All right, let's have a little meditation, and I won't go over on time. Wow, I just said the thing. I have to now make that true. Because you know me, as soon as I drop in a meditation, everything goes away. All right, I'm gonna keep my eyes open as my practice of fulfilling my commitments. Okay, but I encourage you to close your eyes if you'd like to. Okay. Take some nice long exhales to communicate to your nervous system that you're safe, that you're relaxed, you're not in fight or flight, and you're just here. The only place that transformation can occur is in the present. So drop into the present. The object of the meditation is the fifth verse of the second chapter of the Yoga Sutra, and I'll read it. Anitya Shuchi Dukkha Natmasu. Nitya Shuchi Sukmatma Kyatiravidya. In ignorance, we misunderstand our world. What does that mean? In ignorance, we misunderstand our world. What does that mean to me? Let's investigate what that means. What's an example of something that cannot last, that seems to me as if it will last? Choose one very specific example. And it's more useful the more precious it is to you. So, why is it true that it can't last? Prove it to yourself. Do you believe that? In what ways do I act as if it will last? In what ways am I acting which are not aligned with the truth? Now choose one of your habits which is not built on truth. For example, my relationship with my wife, I think will last forever. And I act that way because sometimes I won't be grateful for it. Whereas I know that everything which starts must end, including this relationship. And so, acting in that misunderstanding of not being grateful as one example, what is the result of that cause, of that foolish activity, that misunderstood activity? By getting angry at a leaking roof, I'm creating more anger in my future. By not being grateful for my relationship, I will see the relationship diminish and dwindle away. So, how is your behavior, the behavior which is stuck in misunderstanding that things that cannot last will last? How is that? How does your future look like as a result of your current actions? Do you want that? By definition, the result of that cause is suffering. So think to yourself, I renounce that habit. I give it up. I give up the causes of suffering. So now, how will I change my behavior to be consistent with truth? Now that I know that that thing, which I think will last, truly will not. How will I behave in a way that creates a better future? Abide in that truth. Make firm your resolution to live beautifully, supported by understanding, and you can leave the meditation whenever you're ready. And I ended on time because I kept my eyes open. So obviously you can see how that could easily become a half-hour meditation. Okay, we're done now. Would you like anybody to share your meditation or leave if you need to?
Thank you. Yeah, I thought of an example that I hadn't thought of before, and I think it's going to change what I do with the rest of my day today. Thank
Let's
you.
go. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. I totally agree with Becky. Uh, my thoughts gonna make an impact on a day for sure too.
Yay, cool. Well, that's the whole idea. Yay, let's live in alignment with compassion and truth. I think that's a cool idea. So thanks for taking the time to figure out what that means for you. I think that if we all did that, it'd be a great world. And hopefully, Becky, that gave you a little bit of a flavor of an example of analytical meditation. What we didn't do is stay in that truth longer, because what happens, so first we investigate to be like, oh, and then what's really nice is no more thinking. You just stay in that realization, and then your mind just takes on the form of that realization. And so it becomes easier and easier and easier to remember and to be the further away we are from meditation. Because you have clarity right now, but in 5 minutes you'll be less clear. In 20 minutes you'll be even less clear. And by the end of the day you forgot that you meditated this morning. And so it's really nice to like try to stay as long as you can because it gives you a little more stickiness in your realization. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for showing up. It's so good to see you. Next weekend, we're gonna start in the same way. And then if you want to stick around, then we'll be doing the literal formal lion's dance. Um, so we'll still have this base teaching right now, and then we'll do a couple more sessions. And you can find the schedule online, but that's how it's gonna work. All right. I love you guys. Thanks for being here. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Peace.